Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome back to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is issue number 104, Maxwell Lord. But more importantly, it's our season 5 premiere. We're back. Woohoo! Happy 2021. We're out of the hellscape that is 2020.
Yep, which basically means we'll find a new low. I mean, It means that we'll have things better. I hope that one sounded more genuine.
Well, let's hope that 2021 is better than 2020 because, spoiler alert, we're not 100% certain how 2020 is going to end since we're recording this still in 2020. So also, because of that, we're doing this episode on Maxwell Lord because he's the villain of the new Wonder Woman movie that was, by the time this episode is released, have been out on HBO Max since Christmas Day. But we're recording this before Christmas, so we don't actually know what the movie's going to be like. So maybe by episode 106, we'll have actually watched it.
I actually have positive expectations for this. So I really hope I don't get disappointed by setting myself up like that.
Oh, same. When every advanced review I've read, spoiler free, says it's fantastic and a worthy successor to the original, which was a stellar film in and of its own right. So enough butt kissing on Wonder Woman. Let's talk before we get into the show proper. Let's just do a little bit of housekeeping. For those of you, hopefully, that listened to the mini summary, so to speak, of the changes that I released. But quick summary, we have a new website. It's now capesonthecouch.com. Capesonthecouch.live will redirect you to the capesonthecouch.com website. We went with this because it gives us more options and we can do more with the website. One of those things we're doing with the website is a new column. It's a comic review column written by Ariel. It's called Sum of Its Parts. She's going to be reviewing floppies individually and then going back once the arc is completed and looking back to see, is it the sort of story that reads better week to week, or is it the sort of story that you need to read all together? And how does that sort of flow? And one other big change to our Patreon, for those of you who are patrons and know that we've been doing regular trade paperback reviews, we are now inviting our patrons to guest on those trade paperback reviews. So you can sign up at patreon.com/capesonthecouch, where as little as $1 a month, you can access all of our archived material. You can get access to all the trade paperbacks, and you yourself can join us as a guest on a trade paperback review, and we'll let you pick the book. So we're still in the process of working out the kinks on how to schedule that with our listeners, but it's a fun little bonus. We thought it was a nice little added incentive, so to speak, for our patrons. And we do appreciate all the love and support that you have given us over these almost 3 years, because we're coming up on our 3rd anniversary in March, and we've got some big stuff planned for that. So having said all of that, let's just jump right into it then. Enough beating around the bush. Maxwell Lord, created by Keith Giffen, DeMatteis, and Kevin Maguire in Justice League #1, May of 1987. This is part of the post-Crisis on Infinite Earths reboot of the DC universe, where they consolidated all their history. And so Maxwell Lord is created in the very first issue of the Justice League book, which would then go on to become known as Justice League International. More on that in a second. So Max's father was a businessman who committed suicide after a product he created caused cancer, and his mother convinced him that powerful people cannot be trusted. So in the post-crisis world, he wants to bring the Justice League together, and we later find out he was actually under the control of a supercomputer created by Metron. He breaks free of the control of the computer and sort of befriends the League. And at this point, he's not really a villain. He's not really a good guy. He's in it for the money, and he fully admits that. but he's not really a bad guy. He gains mild telepathy during the invasion event, and using the powers gives him a nosebleed. Instead of using his powers for good, he kind of begins to distrust the metahuman community. So then after being injured in a battle, he gains a cyborg-like body, but he has to battle the computer known as Kilg for control of the body, which he ultimately then maintains and turns the body into something approximating what he looked like as a person. So up to this point, Maxwell Lord has just kind of been a bit of a dick, but he's never really been an out-and-out crazy bad guy until Countdown to Infinite Crisis, where he shoots Ted Kord in the head and reveals that he is in control of a global surveillance network with information on the Justice League. So he uses his telepathic controls to take control of Superman and have him attack Batman and Wonder Woman. Diana then snaps his neck in order to stop him, but the footage goes viral and her reputation is destroyed. So then Booster Gold says everything went wrong once Maxwell killed his buddy Ted Kord. So he goes back in time with several other Blue Beetles to prevent Max from killing Ted Kord, but all this does is make things worse.
Whoa, Stop. You just said Booster Gold went back into time. Do we realize what we're dealing with here? At all? Please check our Booster Gold episode to understand why I'm so concerned whenever someone says that.
Well, Booster Gold goes back further in time, or he goes back in time again. So, I was wondering where you were going with that. I was like, where are you stopping me? So Booster ultimately realizes Ted has to stay dead in order for a better future because it beats the alternative. So then Maxwell Lord is resurrected during the Blackest Night, Brightest Day saga, and he uses technology to boost his powers, and he makes the world forget him. And then he uses technology to create an army of robots to attack the Justice League, and he kills Jamie Reyes, the third Blue Beetle, the same way he killed Ted with a bullet to the head. So in New 52 and Rebirth, he is rebooted as the head of Checkmate, a secret government organization, and he is the Black King, and he uses his position and power to pit metahumans against one another. And then he later ends up as part of Amanda Waller's Task Force 11, which is basically another version of the Suicide Squad. So Max is a character that's been through quite a lot, even though he's only been around for 35 years. He's been a thorn in the side of the Justice League and proven himself to be quite the manipulative bastard, shall we say. So the first issue that I want to discuss is he has this deep-seated distrust of metahumans, despite being one of them. Now, his distrust started before he gained his telepathic abilities, but once he got them, rather than saying, hey, now I'm one of you and we can do good together, it's people with this kind of power can't be trusted and they all need to be taken down a peg. They all need to be destroyed, and we need to preserve things for humanity. And that's an idea put in his head by his mother, who we'll get to shortly. But Doc, I wanted to let you sort of talk about the distrust. It's almost like a self-hating metahuman, so to speak.
So whenever a human being decides that they dislike another group of human beings, or just one other human being, it doesn't have to be a group, there is a certain construct that they have in their head. It is that the person, first of all, disagrees with them, or has a behavior or a thought pattern that is creating dissonance, and they cannot resolve it in any other way. In other words, there's no such thing as a person that can have an emotional connection along with agreement in thought and agreement in action and say they dislike someone. It doesn't match up. So the question is all about magnitudes in each of those categories. With Maxwell, it's easy to say, well, he's one of them. Well, what does that mean, though? He didn't originally have those powers. He had other things happen to him where he's not exactly like every other human being, but it's not the same way that we would consider most superheroes, at least not initially. So his own previous experience may not allow him to relate in the same way. in addition to that, you already hinted at the idea that he had the goal of direct monetary and potential power gains from all of this, all of his interactions. So how many of the humans, especially in the DC universe, how many of the humans are really portrayed, or superheroes portrayed, as people that are doing this for that same motivation? It's much more altruistic in general. I know there are exceptions. So now you have a difference in philosophy that can create any level of dissonance. On top of that, though, there at some point comes a time where you have the rubber meeting the road. If I tell you I want to do something and you tell me that either I should not do it or you will stop me if I try to do it, then it doesn't matter what commonalities we have. Now we have just direct confrontation. We have direct conflict. So if I were to go to your house right now and say, by the way, I want to make sure that you are removed from your home, it doesn't matter if we're neighbors. It doesn't matter if we go to the same church. It doesn't matter if our children play together at the same school. You now have a survival basis to say that I'm going to stop you no matter what. We could have absolutely 100% everything else in common. So I see this as a progression where initially with Maxwell, it's a questioning of what other people are doing, and that's totally normal, totally natural. Then it progresses to a challenge to what other people are doing, a manipulation of what other people are doing, and then ultimately a complete backlash. So it's easy for us to just say, let's just group all of this together, and how can we explain why he would be against other metahumans? While my take is more, we have an individual that notices that other people with a distant commonality are adversarial to his ultimate wishes. And when you frame it like that, it's much more understandable. That doesn't make it right, but that makes it relatable. So from that standpoint, if you are in, I don't know, any organization that requires a certain level, let's say your job, you're in a union, and you necessarily may not like the dues you have to pay. And you may not like the person that's the head of the union. And in addition to that, you notice that your job isn't nearly as fulfilling as it once was once the union had so much power. I'm not making this a political argument. I'm saying that that is an explanation as to how people may feel a certain way. And the next thing you know, they break away from the union, or the next time that there's some organizational strike, they still work because they want to put food on the table for their kids. And now they're called a scab. So that's how these things develop, but everybody just looks at the end result. They don't look at the leading factors, the leading points that progress to that unfortunate situation. So it's horrible the way Maxwell Lord goes about everything. I'm not excusing it. But when you understand that progression, it allows for other people to maybe intervene so it doesn't get to the point where he's dismantling everything else that people are trying to build to help society.
Interesting. I suppose I hadn't, and I'll be the first to admit that I have not read everything Maxwell Lord. I read some of the Justice League International. I read bits and pieces here and there. I read the Countdown to Infinite Crisis, etc. So I'm sure that if you take it on a whole, you can see the progression from A to B to C to say, okay, this is why he ends up here. If you're glossing over it like I did, admittedly, it may come across as a little, well, how did we get here?
Yeah, but see, the thing that I want to point out is that what you did is not just something that you do for a comic book character. It's what we all do on a daily basis with most of the people that we interact with. And it's necessary because we cannot spend all of our day contemplating the entire background of every person that we meet, unless you're a psychiatrist. But the point still stands. Even then, we have 15, 30 minutes, an hour, depending on how long your sessions are, to have those discussions. And even then, we know fully well we're not going to get the whole picture of someone. So we just automatically fill in the blanks. But that is something that if we do incorrectly, we may come to dangerous conclusions as human beings towards one another. So that's why I wanted to present it that way.
No, I think that's an excellent point. And I think it goes back to something that we even have discussed in prior episodes with respect to, say, social media, is you end up comparing yourself to other people's highlight reels versus you were behind the scenes, so to speak. And that we know what our daily struggles are because we're living them, but we don't know what anybody else is going through. And to see somebody go through or make a decision that we may not necessarily agree with, we don't know how that person arrived there. Now, it may be irrational, certainly not saying that that's outside the realm of possibility, but it could be a situation where we don't know everything that they went through to get there. And all we see is this person making, in our minds, what we consider to be a snap decision or an irrational choice, when in their minds, it was the only reasonable thing left to do. So, I mean, we see this all the time, unfortunately, with people that commit horrible crimes, is they've reached a point where they feel this is the only option that they have left. And there were so many points along the way that, as you said, someone could have intervened, someone could have stopped them, but didn't for whatever reason. And now here we are, and we're left to pick up the pieces of what's left. I think that's something that happened with Max. If at any point someone had intervened, they could have stopped him.
Well said.
And Booster tries by going back to the point in which he kills Ted Cord. But I think you need to go back further. I think you need to go back maybe right after he gets his powers, right after the invasion event, and you sit down with him and you go, okay, listen, this is some really heavy stuff. Let's figure out how to make this work. Because I know there's still some good in you. At that point, there was still some redeemable quality within him that's since long been gone. So that's a good segue then, because one of the key straw that broke the camel's back for him was the death of his mother when Coast City was destroyed. And his mother lived in Coast City, and his mother had a very powerful influence on his life. And we see this a lot in one of the later Justice League stories, where they go back and you understand how Maxwell Lord got to this point. As I said, his father committed suicide, so he was 16 when his father died. But that's still a very young and impressionable age. And then his mother convinces him, no, he didn't actually commit suicide. Those bastards that he worked with did it because he exposed them and they killed him. And you can't trust powerful people. You always have to plan. And she put the bug in his ear, so to speak, and really sort of kicked that off. I don't want to speak for the relationships with all of our listeners' mothers, but having a difficult relationship with a parent can certainly lead to some troublesome situations.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to invoke 3 C's here. Correlation, causation, or causality, depending on how people like to say it, and confirmation bias. So we have had several episodes where we've talked about parental relationships and the idea of what ages and what stages of life parental influence can have a massive impact on how a person sees the world. So what I mean by correlation is, in this situation, you have massive events that happen time-wise at the same time as the way a person has to respond and process the event. Maxwell has his father commit suicide. His mother gives him significant information on her views of that circumstance. Maxwell respects what his mother says. I know for a fact that in other episodes, I've pointed out that if you have a strong relationship with your parents, that can be an amazing thing. And I don't want to make it sound like if you believe everything your parents say, that's going to give you problems. What I am going to say, though, is that the fact there's such a strong emotional correlation to that circumstance means that it's going to have an outsized influence and impact on how he acts from that point forward. It's going to shape every other interaction he has after that time. And naturally, what we do is we want to find out, is what my parent is telling me true? And just how close is it to reality? So in Max's case, I know we're going to do some comic book skipping, but I'll just go with it. In Maxwell's case, what's ultimately proven true? Does his mother survive the attack that happens to her city? No, she doesn't. Does he interact with several heroes with powers that had some negative consequences? Yeah, he did. And can he therefore start to cultivate a series of items in his own mind that match what his mother said? Yeah, at that point, he's got a laundry list. And so we now have almost complete correlation in his mind. Why do I keep saying it that way? Because that's still just correlation. We are not mind readers, and as much as Maxwell is positioned to be that, it's not the same thing. We don't know automatically what every other being's motivation is. We only can go by what we see and then what they tell us. So based on that, once again, you have to fill in the blanks. So we never get, or it's unlikely that we ever get absolute causality or causation, depending on how you like to say it. We only assume causation, and Maxwell does that a lot. He assumes the worst when these situations happen. So where does that last part come in? Because what he's really exhibiting is confirmation bias. He purposely is cherry picking every event for things that will follow the view of the information that his mother gave him in the first place, and discarding the rest. Are you really trying to tell me that his mother, and don't get me wrong, in comics, we can always go back to this, I know, but if anybody is caught in a horrible natural disaster or horrible event, are you really trying to tell me that unless you find that manifesto of the person that did it, or if it's a natural disaster, I'm sorry, and I apologize, I'm not trying to insult anyone here, you're not going to get that divine scriptural writing that says, yes, by the way, I caused that hurricane to make sure that these certain people on this block of this street lost their homes due to flooding. Or this earthquake happened because I wanted to make sure so-and-so who makes too much money ends up getting punished for the illegal way that he got his gains. You're not going to find that, and yet that's pretty much the way his lens is viewed, and it's all based on what someone in a position of, ironically, of power, of strength, of compassion, who was also likely, and by likely I mean, oh yeah, dealing with her own emotional state with someone so close to her dying and all of the things that go with that pain, skewing that, coloring that lens. And now we're just getting a magnification in generations based on faulty ideas of correlation equaling causation, and then using confirmation bias to just continue to build and build for the rest of your life. That is something that no one phrase or one interaction is going to just fix. So this may sound like, if I'm doing it the wrong way, I'm saying Maxwell Lord's mother is responsible for everything he did. No, she is not. And in no way should that be the way it's shaped. But it is fair to say that parents can have a lasting impact on how children process things, even if we're not aware of it. Or if we really try and shape it in a way that they're not going to be able to develop any other modeling or changing of that model, then there's a lot of rigidity that develops. if that's the case, then we're going to have more work to do on multiple layers. And unfortunately, it also adds the condition that, by the way, while we're doing this, don't insult his mom.
Well, I was just going to say that when it comes down to it, I fall back on the truism, parents just don't understand. Sorry, I had to make the joke there. It wrote itself. So the third thing, and this is something that was a major part of his character before he got telepathy, and certainly once he gained the ability to control people, is the need to be in control. He needs to have a plan for everything. He needs to have a backup plan, and he needs to have a backup plan to that plan. He has to see all of the angles. And again, that's partly because of what his mother said, but also that's just, I think, a large part of just who he is as a person. That's exhausting. And you cannot plan for every eventuality. I don't care who you are. It's one of the many, many complaints I have about Batman as a character is, oh, Batman has a plan for everything. That. Maxwell Lord is like the villainous version of that. But the need for control and the need to always have a plan, the need to always have something to say, something to do, it's not realistic, but to the extent that it is, what does that say about a person?
So just to give even more comic background with this, that directly ties into Countdown to Infinite Crisis and Infinite Crisis, because part of what happened was Brother I ends up being manipulated, and there are a lot of OMACs created. Think humans that become more or less androids. But Brother I was a construct predominantly of Batman. So it was the idea that Batman wanted ultimate surveillance, and then it gets used against him, which makes for a great story, no question about it. But it's interesting that you just mentioned it that way, so I figured I'd just throw that in as well. The idea, though, that this is way on the opposite end of the spectrum of, let's say, She-Hulk, who has acknowledged that she doesn't plan anything, and you can listen to our episode about that. There's always going to be a ratio of action to reaction. And if you have a plan and a backup plan and a backup plan to the backup plan, what it means is your actions are going to be usually highly calculated, much slower. People, and in comics, they don't have to worry about this, but in reality, it means that you're usually going to suffer some sort of paralysis by analysis. So you're not going to act nearly as quickly as you usually would. And then even the actions you take, you're going to second guess every step of the way, because you're going to wonder, okay, was this right? Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with course correction while you're doing something. It's good to make things a little better than they were before. As a matter of fact, that's pretty much the whole point of therapy. But there's a limit. There's just a natural progression. You need to sleep. You need to deal with things on an emotional level with people that you care about. If all you're doing is just putting the effort into making sure that things go a certain way, but then don't even reap the rewards of it, then you're not getting the justification as to why you were doing it in the first place. To take it to something that people can understand and find enjoyable. If you're going on vacation, it's great to have an itinerary. It's wonderful to have the things you want to do. But if you're spending more time doing that in terms of figuring out what you want to do, how you're going to do it, what time you need to be there, what schedule the buses run, or whatever thing that you need to do, the plane tickets, the trip itself in terms of who's going to be picking you, all those things, they're all important. I don't want to say they're not important, but my point is you do that, and let's say someone is 5 minutes late. How do you respond to that? Some people point out, weather's bad. It sucks. Other people will go into absolute panic mode, start calling 3 or 4 people simultaneously saying, hey, what can you do for me? I need to get picked up, et cetera, et cetera. And then the next thing you know, they have 3 or 4 people now that are at the airport ready to pick them up because that person said one person was 5 minutes late and I needed to make sure things happened. So now you've disrupted the lives of other people involved. You have made sure that no one's going to want to deal with you ever again because you probably were pretty surly when you were dealing with this because you thought you were being insulted because you're now adding emotional responses to something that was an unemotional event. So the problem is you can't do any of these things in a vacuum. They are all interconnected with what other people are doing. That type of planning, that type of acknowledgement that there is a certain level of fluidity to everything that happens, and the idea that things are not going to happen according to plan. And Anthony, believe it or not, you introduced that statement to me, man plans, God laughs. That is something that's inherent in what we're dealing with on a daily basis. And if a person doesn't acknowledge that, that automatically creates anxiety. And then if the person, even if they acknowledge it after the fact, if they had no emotional construct for it, leads to depression. And of course, in the moment where you need to have action and the person already had a planned action that no longer can happen, then that can lead to anger. So there is an actual direct emotional response in each one of those categories for how the person is responding to a stimulus that they, in all honesty, never had control over. But it gave the illusion of control because they planned everything out. That is the part that I think is so frustrating to not just me, because I know that happens to me, but I'll admit I'm not a great planner. I am not. And so I've come to grips with the idea that there's going to be a lot of things that don't go my way or the way I want them to. But a lot of the people around me are very good planners. And I see it take the toll on them when things are not exactly going perfectly. Or there's a pandemic that comes by and just totally craps on everything.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Hey, I was talking about my wife. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm kidding. Look, everybody, seriously, I know we're all going through that. But yeah, there is no question. This whole year has shown me more than ever. I had a feeling this is how people were dealing with life. Now I know it. I have the direct evidence. It's fascinating to see and hear. Those moments where I'm by myself, I'm like, all right, cool. Meanwhile, everybody else is saying, how can anybody live like this? And I just slowly, shut up and sip my coffee and walk away.
You pull a Homer just backing up into the bushes. Now, as a planner myself, that's something that I'm working with my therapist on addressing, that I don't have to have an answer and a plan for every little thing. I can have ideas, I can have goals, but if things don't happen exactly according to plan, so be it. It wasn't meant to be.
Yeah, another psychiatrist
Let it go.
Another psychiatrist pointed out to me, things are definitely happening. The emotional problem comes when things are happening to you. When you add that part, that's when it becomes a problem.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. So we're going to take our short break, and when we come back, we'll get into treatment. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Tanner.
And I'm Lindsay.
And together we host a podcast called Not If I Reboot You First.
It's a show where we take our favorite properties and reboot them before Hollywood gets the chance to.
We also do adaptations and spin-offs and sequels, but everybody seems to call those reboots too.
It's everyone's favorite buzzword.
Sometimes we make something really good, like when we turned The Mummy into a proper pilot for the Dark Universe.
Sometimes things go bad and I drunkenly yell at J.K. Rowling for an hour.
And sometimes it gets really weird and we time crash the entire Mighty Ducks franchise into a single universe.
So join us every week for something that's a little bit like brainstorming fanfiction.
Follow us on Twitter at NIIRYFPod. Those are the letters for the name of the show, and it's pronounced Near.
I turned Princess Belle into Iron Man once.
Wait, what?
Remember the first time you held a controller? That first cartridge you blew into so you could get that stinking game to work. What about your first comic you read? The first time you saw Star Wars, years and years and years ago. Now you're an adult, working full-time to provide for you and your family. But even after all of your hard work, you still make it your quest to spend time with your kids, hoping they find even the slightest interest in some of the things that you had grown up loving. Video games, movies, comics, My Little Ponies. Join me, Kyle Federline, every Wednesday morning on my quest as I discuss with guests what it's like to raise a kid and watch them take after some of our own interests as kids, or have no interest at all in the things that we had grown up loving. This is Parent Quest. Head on over to Anchor and ask me your questions, leave me a voice message, and follow me on Twitter at ParentQuestPod, Instagram and Facebook at ParentQuest.
Hi, I'm Howard Mackie, and this is Capes on the Couch.
And we're back. So, treatment in universe for Maxwell Lord, dealing with a telepath who doesn't think too highly of the inevitable metahumans that you would need to assist you. That's a dicey situation. But I'm sure, as always, you have a well thought out plan for everything.
So, yes, I do have an idea of a plan, and spoiler alert, I kind of hint at it in the skit, but that's not the same thing. There is one time specifically where Maxwell was not in control. It was unfortunate because it also led to his neck being snapped, but he was under control of the Lasso of Truth. Do I want Wonder Woman to just lasso this man and just be done with it? No, I don't. If there's a variation, though, if, for example, he had a bracelet with a few fibers woven in, and therefore it's a mitigating risk. It's not meant to completely eliminate his ability to quote unquote lie. Because I know it's a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's important. We don't have to be open about every single point in our lives. It's okay to have things that you don't immediately disclose to everyone you come in contact with, which is why I don't want the Lasso of Truth. I don't need to know the last time this guy, masturbated in the bathroom. But my point being, if it allows him to at least have some level of more basic naive understanding that you're going to have interactions with people that have the potential to go well. And it doesn't have to be the situation where he has to run everything from the start or manipulate them or think he has to use powers to do it. Then I'm pretty sure we could get somewhere. Because the only other alternatives that I've seen, and I know I've used this as a method with other characters, is to join him, which in his circumstances, the way he runs, not a chance. Not going to happen. Or I need the type of backup where I just completely mess things up and change things for him. But we saw how that went with Booster Gold. But then again, maybe that's partly because it was Booster Gold. I'm sorry, I don't need to rag on him. I love the guy. But I don't want to go those routes. I want Maxwell Lord to remain who he is, just with a little bit of opportunity. And that's going to lead to something that I'm going to talk about with out-of-universe treatment as well.
All right. Well, then I'll just let you get into that then. So, I was going to say out-of-universe treatment then would be a megalomaniacal businessman with some trust issues and a messed up background.
Yeah. So combination of trauma, emotional stunting, clearly though has a lot of things going for them in terms of power, wealth, or combination, whatever. That person is usually incredibly protective of their mental state, and rightfully so, because it's important for them to get things done. But for the sake of therapy, under a properly supervised and controlled setting, there are ways to have the person experience a little bit of a different state. Obviously, we don't have the Lasso of Truth, but we do have ketamine, or another thing called esketamine, which has been approved for depression. Ketamine has been approved for major depression infusion. But my point is, it can be used safely to help a person with a combination of depression and traumatic events to have experiences with the guidance of a therapist that can lead to an improvement in mood and functioning. And it's something that is still in the process of being reviewed, as with most other things that were at one point just completely ignored or banned or whatever. And once again, I know I've given this disclaimer before, just say no to most drugs. I'm pointing out that this is a very controlled environment. This is not saying, all right, find someone you know that has the good stuff on the street. That is not what I'm advocating whatsoever. I'm just introducing the idea that there are alternative treatments that people sometimes don't consider or have not considered, despite the fact that they've had refractory depression on multiple medications and have had ECT and have had TMS. You always look for what has not been done yet that may provide a greater benefit compared to the risk. If the person has had a history of psychotic episodes, a history of anger when using substances, a history of aggression when using substances, then no, this is not the proper treatment. If the person has had a history of addiction, this is not the proper treatment. But I want to make sure that people are at least aware of it. And it's something that still is being studied. So I don't want to pretend this is a panacea, not by a long shot. But I also didn't want to make this sound like every other episode where I've talked about people in these types of positions of power and how you have to ingratiate yourself to them and make sure that you're acknowledging what they want and make it a two-way street. Oh, that okay. We've gone over that time after time after time. I just wanted to introduce something new that I know for a fact I really hadn't introduced before.
All right. I know you're always trying to give us a different take, and I know we've done Evil Businessman before. We did Lex Luthor. We did Wilson Fisk. We've done that. So I appreciate you taking it and putting a bit of a different spin on it. If nothing else, it'll make for some good quotes that we can put up on Instagram and Twitter to promote the episode. So I appreciate that. So let's wrap all this up in a bow then and see what happens when we get Maxwell Lord on Dr. Issues' couch.
Hello, Maxwell. I'm Dr. Issues.
Hello, Doctor. Now get up and walk out of the room.
Nice try, Mr. Lord, but I think you'll find the blood thinners you're on make the use of your powers quite impossible.
Not that I need mental powers to crush you. I have a few, let's say, anatomical anomalies that would make it easy to mold you into an uncomfortable shape.
Read your chart. I know you don't have that type of body, so either you're delusional or you're lying. I'll go ahead and say your information is unreliable.
Damn. Well, it's clear that you take several precautions when dealing with your patients. What made you so paranoid?
Come again?
No other doctor has to take these types of precautions. Not even psychiatrists. I mean, you're experienced, but clearly that has bred fear. What if I told you we have the same goal of protecting the world?
Whoa, my ego's not that large, man. I want to help every patient I come across, but I don't have any aspirations beyond that. You're my focus.
But there's no better way to aid me than to directly help me. You've spotted my weaknesses, my lies. Only one other person has done that consistently, and well, we don't need to discuss that now. She'll get her soon enough.
What was that?
Nothing. As I was saying.
No, I get it. You were saying that I needed to help you. Look, I'll level with you. I get this all the time. Everybody else is wrong and you're right. Heard it all before. I don't have to agree automatically, but I do have to acknowledge your opinion because it shapes your emotions.
A bit testy there, Dr. Issues. You do have a way of presenting yourself as an everyman. I see that. But you're not them. You don't have powers. You're utterly defenseless. I noticed the spackle, the new window frames juxtaposed to the ones that didn't need replacement. Is this the life you want? Do you truly feel effective when each encounter can lead to your death?
All right, that's a complete myth. Mental health patients are actually more likely to experience harm against them.
Oh, stop. We're not talking about the worried well. We're talking about beings that can fly, shoot lasers, use magic, travel through time, burn, freeze, who knows what to all forms of matter, and you're going to compare them to a regular Joe Schmo? No, doctor. You're dealing with people, if you can call them that, who violate your own oath. Do no harm? Ha!
I can't help but notice that you're more interested in talking about everyone and everything besides yourself. That's the antithesis of individual treatment.
Fine. If you wish to talk about me, at least acknowledge that you've treated those that have killed other people.
Okay, true.
And they have threatened you.
Also true. But...
And they've lied to you.
Yeah?
And destroyed your property.
Yes!
Now you get it. You see, these are the types that lead to desolate wastelands, ruin our society, deplete our population. We have no choice. You have no choice.
Yes. Yes, I have no choice.
So now you know what to do. You must leave this office.
I must leave this office.
Smart man. Now, if you'll excuse me.
After this session.
What?
I have to do more. I have to work harder. It's my fault. I get too complacent. There's too much going on in mental health disparities. I've been thinking too small. I've been using anonymity as a proxy for timidity. I should have volunteered as a provider for the sanctuary. I should have petitioned for stronger regulation of Brother Eye. I should have... You know what I should do? I should consult the Amazonians to produce the most therapeutic restraints ever modeled after the Lasso of Truth. I need to...
Enough!
Huh? I'm sorry. I kind of went off on a tangent there. It happens, once in a while. Anyway, it's clear that you're more focused on those around you than on yourself. It's stunting your psychological growth, Mr. Lord.
You really are a sanctimonious bastard. You know that? Well, let me be the first to tell you that you aren't as smart as you think. I've killed geniuses. I made the most powerful alien on the planet bend to my whim. You bowed to me just now, and you don't even know it. The world at large forgot me because I wished it. I am Maxwell Lord. My will be done.
Never mind. You're definitely grandiose. Besides, if you did anything to me, I'm pretty sure I'd just go with the flow like most other situations. Some people really dislike that about me. I don't like creating waves,
Even when you're a pathetic plaything, you're a smug Pollyanna jerk. Except now, instead of a cynic, you're some sort of an optimist.
Well, like I always say, scratch a cynic and...
This is going nowhere. Since I know what you're telling me is how you really feel, I have no use for you.
Wow. Usually when someone says something like that to me, it means they're going to attack me. I mean, since I figured you'd fall into the same category, I guess that means the slew of heroes I've seen will need to be notified via the security alert system that's activated with, each high-risk patient I see on the Justice League's watch list. But to be fair, though, I mean, you could actually just kill me before they respond. Okay, Sarah, but, or you could actually try treatment.
You've learned to manipulate the mind without extra powers. Genuinely fascinating. Perhaps there is more to therapy than I thought. So, Dr. Issues, how many sessions until I have access to confidential information on heroes?
None. You have to kill me. Of course, we just discussed the results of that.
At this point, I'd rather get lassoed again. At least that removes my will. Well, you survived another encounter with the villain.
I don't know. He
not for lack of trying.
Well, I mean, was he really that much of a villain? He just wanted my honest opinion of things, and as with many people, once they actually get it, they don't like it.
I get your honest opinion all the time. And I still like you.
Well, that's why you're in therapy. No. Okay, it's a joke. It's a joke. It's a joke.
I walked into that one. Well played. Well played, bro. So, recommended reading for this week is the Justice League International series, the Giffen DeMatteis years, and Infinite Crisis. I think those are the two big Maxwell Lord stories, and you can find them on DC Universe, which will soon be DC Infinite, coming, I think, at some point late January. It's going to transition over to DC Infinite, and it's going to be just comics, much like Marvel Unlimited. So we have a subscription, and it's pretty good so far. Thoroughly enjoying it. So next episode's coming up is the Vision Scarlet Witch relationship to tie in with WandaVision, which so excited to see that. Cannot wait to see that. Clones and Catwoman. So these first two episodes coming back are more synergistic because of the release of mass media, but starting with Clones, we'll get back into the patron selected episodes. As we said at the top of the show, if you go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/capesonthecouch and subscribe, you can earn the right now to guest on our trade paperback review episodes. So if you decide to sign up, hit us up and we'll schedule something. And if you're already a patron, then we've already hit you up and we're working on trying to schedule you for a future episode. So that should be a lot of fun. And I know we said at the top of the show, we just moved our website to capesonthecouch.com, but you can still find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Capes on the Couch. That has not changed, nor has our YouTube channel, where we still post regular videos. And our email address is still capesonthecouch@gmail.com. So I think that's going to about wrap it up for this episode. It's good to be back. I didn't say this at the start, but it's really, really good to be back. I know we spent some time away, but it just kind of gave me a little bit of recharge the batteries. But I'm very, very excited for what we've got coming in 2021.
You and me both.
Especially March. Stay tuned. We haven't announced all of the stuff that we have coming for March yet, but March is going to be a very, very big month for us. So stay tuned for that. And on that note, for Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.